much for being on the show today. I really appreciate all your work. How are you?
I am a happy guy, especially now we're connected on the phone, Alan. I so appreciate being with you.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it, too. And, you know, we really just want to, I mean, there's a lot we can talk about, but I really want to jump into really the theme of the show, which is really this merging of science and consciousness and, you know, in a way, the biological foundation for what is this thing that we really are? What is this thing of consciousness? Who are we? I mean, can you talk about that in biological terms?
Absolutely, Alan, and it's really important because when I was teaching in the medical school and teaching conventional curriculum, we were teaching the concept that genes control life. I say, what does that mean to the public when you say genes control life? That means to the public that whatever genes they received at the moment of conception in some sense represents a blueprint that will really control the outcome of the rest of their lives. So for example, if you have a so-called cancer gene running in your family, and then you say, oh my God, I inherited this gene, then you anticipate at some point in your life that cancer is going to manifest itself. And I say, what's the relevance of that? And the answer is, we perceive ourselves as victims of our heredity. Whatever your programs are, that's the character of your life, and you can't do anything about it. And being powerless, that causes us to go outside of ourselves to seek help in maintaining our own biology. So we go to the medical profession, but particularly to the pharmaceutical industry, to cover those issues that our genes screwed up with and we can't do anything about. Well, that belief system is totally false. The idea that genes turn on and off, that's totally an inaccurate assessment. A gene is a blueprint, no different in a sense than a blueprint in an architect's office. So if you go in the architect's office and she's working on a blueprint, you say, is your blueprint on or off? She'd look at you like, are you crazy? There's no on and off to a blueprint. And I go, this is exactly true for genes. Genes are blueprints, but the mind becomes the contractor that calls up the blueprints and can modify the blueprints. And I say, why is that relevant? Because we've disregarded the role of mind in our biology, and it turns out in the new science called epigenetics, mind is the master controller. The old science everyone out there has been programmed is called genetics. And I say, well, what does it mean when I say genetic control? It means control by genes, which takes you out of the picture and says your gene blueprints are controlling your life. That belief has been replaced by a new science called epigenetics. And it sounds the same, except when I say epigenetic control, recognize that epi means above. So when I say epigenetic control, it means the new science, control above the genes. And we now know that the control is our consciousness, our perceptions, our beliefs, and our attitudes. These are the things that select our genes. And all of a sudden I say, why is it relevant? Well, since I can change my perception and my attitude, then it says I'm not stuck with my gene programs, but I'm free to change them during my life. And that's where self-empowerment comes into the program, letting go of the belief that I'm a victim of heredity and owning the new science that my consciousness, my perceptions and beliefs are the ultimate control of my genetics. Changing consciousness changes my life. So it's a re-empowering for individuals to understand epigenetics.
Changing consciousness, but the change in consciousness is in a way programmed by a culture that doesn't want us to change. So, you know, the real challenge is not just the genetics, it's the environment, as you would call it. So how do we shift that?
But it's our perception of the environment. So if I buy a perception that genes control my life, I buy that. And then I buy the belief that I have a gene that will cause cancer. Well, then it says, well, if my consciousness is controlling it, and my consciousness says genes control me, and I have a negative gene, then my consciousness will take that meaning and create a negative expression that complements consciousness. Our biology is a complement to our consciousness. A healthy biology reflects a healthy consciousness, and in contrast, disease states which we've always attributed to organic things. It turns out less than 1% of disease has anything to do with our genetics. And all of a sudden I said, well, then what's controlling our disease? I go, consciousness. And if we want to change disease, we change consciousness. You go, well, that sounds like New Age fairy talk. And then I go, wait a minute. For 100 years, we've known about placebo effect. I said, what's that? I said, it's a belief, a consciousness that a particular drug or surgery is going to help me. I take the drug or have that surgery, and then I get better, and then later find out that the drug was a sugar pill or the surgery was a sham, it wasn't real, and yet I got healed. And so I say, well, then what the heck healed me? Not the sugar pill, not the fake surgery. It was my belief, my consciousness. And all of a sudden I go, yeah, everybody goes, yeah, that's a placebo effect. We know that. Your belief controls your biology. And I go, yes. But what people don't understand is that negative beliefs are equally powerful to positive beliefs. And I say, why is it relevant? And the answer is profound, is that psychologists will tell you 70% or more of an average person's beliefs are negative and disempowering and self-sabotaging. And so I say, well, my God, if 70% of your life is programmed to be powerless and to have problems, then look at the world. And I say, yeah, look at all the illness we have. I go, it's not due to genetics. It's due to the stresses and belief systems that we acquired. Change your belief like a placebo, and you can change the character of your life. So we have to let go of a program that disempowered us, a program of genetics, and own the new science of epigenetics that says our environment and our perceptions control life. And I say relevance. If genes control your life, you can't change those. But if environment and perception control your life, well, surely you can change those. And all of a sudden it says we go from the old belief in genetics, victim of my heredity, to the new belief in epigenetics that says all I have to do is change my perception, my environment, and I can change my life, and that's empowerment. So we're not victims. We're very powerful creators.
But some people think they're being very positive, and yet there's still illness or whatever, you know. Some people have unconsciously been victimized without them knowing it, and they think they're having a positive thing. Yeah, and then what do you say?
Well, that's again another misunderstanding. The misunderstanding is my consciousness is creating my life. I go, okay, wait, your mind is creating your life. That's a correct statement. And I say, yeah, but the mind has two components, the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. I say, what's the difference? The conscious mind, the one connected to your personal identity, your spirituality, is a creative mind. That's what makes humans so stand out above other life forms, is that our mind isn't just a stimulus, response, reaction. Our mind is creative. So when we're being conscious, we're being creative. And then I go, and the subconscious mind is just a database of programs that we acquired. And once we learn them, they become habits. So, and people say, well, the subconscious mind is evil. I go, no. Subconscious mind is just a cold machine. It records a behavior, and when the stimulus is right, it plays back the same behavior. To give example, the very positive side of subconscious is, think about it this way. How much effort did it take us to learn how to walk? And that was before age 2. And I said, well, how old are you now? 40, 50, 60, 70. You're still walking. I said, yeah, that's a program in the subconscious. So thank God I have a subconscious. I don't have to relearn how to walk. So there are habits that are really necessary and good for us. But unfortunately, in learning, we can also acquire habits that are disempowering and self-sabotaging. And I go, okay, so which mind should I be working from? Conscious mind, creative wishes and desires, or subconscious mind, programs? And I go, the issue is that you have to have the programs in before you can become conscious. In other words, the first 7 years of a child's life, you have to download programs so that consciousness as a neurological function kicks in at age 7. So I said, wait, if I wasn't conscious until age 7, what was happening before age 7? I go, we were in a brain state called theta, which is hypnosis. And the reason for that is first you have to download programs, and then when you become conscious, you can manipulate programs. But if you have no programs, then consciousness shows up. You have nothing to think about. So the analogy I give in class is I say, look, you buy a brand new iPod, you take it out of the box, you spend a lot of money. The front of the iPod is called a touch screen, and that's where you can create a playlist and adjust the volume and fast forward. It's conscious manipulation, like creating a playlist. I go, so you got a brand new iPod, take it out of the box, and you push play on the touch screen, and nothing happens. And then some little 7-year-old kid comes up and says, hey, mister, you didn't download any music. You can't play any music. Oh, so when you get an iPod, there's a memory, and until you download some programs, once you have programs, then you can be creative and make a playlist and do all these things. So the analogy is the same for a human. When you're born, there's nothing in your database. And I say, well, then be conscious. Consider that a baby just being born can speak. The baby's coming out of the birth canal, and we say, tell us something. And the baby will look at you totally confused, going, listen, I don't know anything. I just got here. And so basically, we now know the first 7 years of our lives is a download period where we learn programs not by experiencing them, but by observing your mother, your father, your family, and your community in a state of theta, which is hypnosis. You download their behaviors, and that's where you get a behavior database. When they're age 7, then you can engage those behaviors. Now, scientists will reveal that up to 70% of the programs that we acquired before age 7 are disempowering, self-sabotaging, or limiting beliefs. And you go, okay, but so I got those negative or disempowering programs, but I'm not going to use them. I'm going to use my conscious mind. And I go, well, there's where the problem comes from. Well, the conscious mind is creative. The conscious mind can think. I say, yeah, but what does that mean? I go, what's that, Alan? Hello, Alan?
Hey, Bruce?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Did I
question here, Dr. JJ and Desiree Hertok, and they love your work too, and they want to ask if you
I love them. They're the brilliant
about science and biology, and they've been students and teachers. So this is JJ Hertok.
Yes.
Thank you for taking this call. In so many words, explain how free will comes into the equation of epigenetics.
Okay, free will is a creative character. Free will is I want this, I want that. So that's by nature creative, which is by nature origin in the conscious mind. So when I'm in my conscious creative mind, I could have all these wonderful visions of health, happiness, love, success. So I go, really great. And I say, are we running from our conscious mind in our day-to-day life? Is our conscious mind controlling what's happening in our biology? And the answer is no. Only 5% of our life is under the direct control of conscious mind. 95% of our life is under the direct control of the subconscious. And I go, yeah, but the subconscious has got programs primarily from other people. So when you look at your life, I say, well, yeah, 5% of the time you are creative and manifesting. Unfortunately, 95% of the time, your behavior is controlled by the programs that you got before age 7. And since, as I mentioned, the vast majority of those are disempowering and you're operating them 95% of the time, then your life doesn't really seem to manifest the creative wishes and desires of your conscious mind because you're not even using that mind. So just to give an analogy, JJ, you and your wife are, I just want to say, well, I got that moment in a platform. Your work is so amazing and so vital for our evolution, and it's connected to this understanding. And it goes like this. Conscious mind can think. And when conscious mind is thinking, that's an inside job. A thought is not on the outside of your biology. The thought is buried deep in your mind. So the moment you are thinking, consciousness is not looking at the outside. Consciousness is focused on a thought on the inside. I go, yeah, but if you're driving the car or walking down the street and you have a thought, it doesn't mean you crash the car or walk off the sidewalk. Somehow or other, you're still driving, you're still walking. I go, oh, when your conscious mind is thinking, it lets go of the control of the vehicle, and our biology vehicle, our body, is now under the control of autopilot. Well, autopilot is subconscious. I go, yeah, but the characters when we're in autopilot are not from the creative mind. They're coming from the program, which are other people's beliefs. So that means in an average person's life, 5% of the day they are actually moving toward wishes and desires, health, happiness, great relationships, good jobs. That's 5%. But 95% of the day when we're thinking, we're playing the programs that we downloaded from other people. So 95% of the day, we're not living off of our wishes and desires. We're just replaying old programs. And the lectures that I give this example because there's no better one to explain what we're just talking about. And I go like this. Perhaps in your growing up, you were very close to a friend. You knew your friend's behavior very, very well, and you happen to know your friend's parent. One day, you see your friend has the same behavior as their parent, so of course you want to acknowledge that. So you say, hey, Bill, you're just like your dad. And then you back away from Bill, because Bill will go ballistic and say, how can you compare me to my dad? I'm nothing like my dad. And most people laugh, and I say, this is the most profound story to explain what we're talking about, and simply this. Everybody else can see that Bill behaves like his dad. The only one who doesn't see it is Bill. I said, well, explain that. I said, well, A, he got the behavior from his dad in the first 7 years of his life where he was being programmed. B, he only plays the subconscious behavior when his conscious mind is busy, 95% of the time. But when he's playing that program that he got from his father, his conscious mind's not observing it. Why? Because his conscious mind let go of the control, went inside to think, and therefore is not experiencing the behavior that's playing from subconscious. So everybody else sees that Bill is behaving like his dad, but Bill doesn't see it because when he's playing that program he got from his father, he's only playing it because the conscious mind's busy. And I go, and the story of Bill is the story of every one of us. Every one of us, like Bill, are playing our subconscious programs 90% of the day, and we are the ones that don't see it. Now, interestingly, sometimes you see it just as you're coming out of thought, and you see the tail end of that behavior that was playing automatically, and all of a sudden in chagrin you go, oh, my God, I was just like my mother. Oh, my God, I was just like my father. You just see the tail end of it. But this is playing 95% of the day. And I say, what's the relevance? And Alan and JJ, my dear friends, what's relevant about it is this. The creative character of our life comes from either conscious or subconscious, which is ever in control. When conscious is in control, 5% of the time, we are creating wishes and desires. But 95% of the day, subconscious is in control, and therefore we're just playing programs, and we become the manifestation of our program. And to close that, the Jesuits, 400 years have told people this, and nobody understood it. The Jesuits said, give me a child for the first 7 years, and I will show you the man. What they already knew for 400 years is whatever program you got in the first 7 years, 95% of your life is going to be
Bruce,
an expression of that.
One thing I wanted to discuss with you, please forgive me for interrupting because I love your answer. Let us look at the connection, and we've discussed this last year in Europe, between what I consider the interrelationship of the epigenetic and the epigenetic, where the epigenetic is influencing the chromosomal pattern, the vibratory pattern that is essential in this process that you speak of in terms of some of the epigenetic processes. Could you elaborate this a little more, how the epigenetic is subsumed under the epigenetic in some unique way?
Yes, very, very simply. I mean, the experiment that shifted my whole life from the conventional talk of genetic control was back in 1967, 68. And what I did is I put genetically identical cells into 3 different petri dishes and changed the chemical composition of the culture medium ever so slightly in each dish. So 3 dishes had genetically identical cells, but slightly different culture medium. Culture medium is laboratory version of blood. So the chemistry was slightly different. In one dish, the cells form muscle. The other dish, they form bone. And in the third dish, they form fat cells. Recognizing they were all genetically identical, I said, then what created the difference? Why did one dish have muscle, the other dish have bone? And the answer was not genetics, but the composition of the culture medium, the chemistry. And I go, oh, so genes didn't control life. They all had the same genes. It was the chemistry environment that the cells found themselves in. And now to make the jump, I go, well, wait a minute. In a plastic petri dish, culture medium is my laboratory version of blood. If I change the chemistry of the culture medium, I change the fate of the cells. And then I say, now wait. A human being is like a skin-covered petri dish. Under your skin, you have 50 trillion cells. You have the original culture medium, blood. And I go, well, what's the relevance? I say, it doesn't make a difference if the cell is in a plastic dish or the cell is in your skin-covered body dish. The cell is still going to respond to the blood, the composition, the culture medium. And I say, well, why is that relevant? And I go, because in this case, then the blood composition controls our fate. And I go, yeah, and here's the connecting part, JJ. I say, yeah, but what is it that controls the composition of the blood, the culture medium? And the answer is your mind. Your mind is creating an image, and the function of the brain is to make a chemical complement to the image. So if I hold a picture of love in my mind, a chemical complement would be dopamine for pleasure, oxytocin for bonding to that pleasure, growth hormone. When I'm in love, chemistry that comes out of the brain and goes into the blood includes growth hormone, and that's why people are so healthy when they fall in love. People say, oh, look how they glow. They're so in love. I go, that's not an accident. That's chemistry in the blood affecting the 50 trillion cells in your skin-covered dish. I say, but if that same person, the mind switches to fear, I say, oh, different chemistry. Fear chemistry is not love chemistry. So the blood changes chemistry the moment I perceive fear, and that puts in stress agents and agents that affect the immune system. And I go, wow, as I change my consciousness, I change the composition of my blood. And then I go, yeah, and as demonstrated in the experiment, it's the composition of the blood that controls the genetics. Epigenetics is the name. And I say, why irrelevant? I say, change your perception. The moment you change your perception, right, you've changed your genetic activity. And exactly. All of a sudden I said, well, then I'm not a victim because I'm the one that can change my perception. I go, yes, you are the master. And if you get the right program, then you're going to feed yourself wonderful chemistry and manifest all the wonderful things you want. And if you have negative programs, then you're fighting against a chemistry that it doesn't support your wishes and desires, and that's the average situation.
Now, Bruce, your work has thus rewrites biological textbooks. This message has to get out into a global commons through satellite education. What are your recommendations we as retired academics, but also as futurists, could do to help this process of love get more distributed in the scientific community? I know you write great books. And how can we take this into a greater, we say, connectiveness with world humanity?
Yeah, we have to recognize that that this information, especially the epigenetics, have been known since 1990, and it's just getting out to the public right now. The public needs to know that you are not a victim of your heredity as they have been programmed. Oh, there's cancer running in my family, there's heart disease, and everybody immediately psychologically says, oh my God, I can get that. And I go, yeah, but if your brain has a picture of disease, then the chemistry in your blood will manifest whatever the picture is. That's the nature of consciousness. So what can we do? And I say, well, the biggest problem we have is that the money in healthcare is coming from the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry sells chemical drugs. What we're talking about is energy healing, consciousness. It's energy. I go, so why is that relevant? I say, well, once people know that you could heal yourself with consciousness, nobody's going to buy the drugs, which would be a smart move, except the industry sells drugs. So what do you think they've been doing? As this information keeps coming up that we have power, they keep over pushing the story that we're still victims, more drugs, more chemistry, because their model, their financial model is based on selling drugs. You can't put energy into a pill or a capsule. If you could put energy into a pill or capsule, the pharmaceutical industry would be selling these new energy drugs, but they can't. They can't. They only work with chemistry. So the pharmaceutical industry, with all of its money, has suppressed the information both in medical school and in the public to keep themselves empowered rather than empowering us. So you see there's a force that's really resisting this change. It's an economic force from a pharmaceutical industry, and we have to bypass it. We have to get out there and just say, hey, that placebo. Yeah, and there's a financial upheaval, and guess what? They're killing themselves. Why? The cost of medicine and the cost of conventional allopathic care for things like cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, which are all related to consciousness. Only less than 1%, this is a fact, this is a point, less than 1% of disease is attributed to genes. Less than 1% of disease is caused by genes, and what the heck is 90% of disease caused by? Now we know it's our creating a chemistry in our body through our psychology that is not healthy. And we can change the chemistry just by changing our psychology. And all of a sudden I say, my God, that's empowerment. I go, yes, and that's what you've been talking about, you and your wonderful partner, JJ, for years. And Alan and I have been talking about this for years as well, and we're still here. And the public is catching on, and the evolution out of the old limitation is happening right now. We're seeing the planet is going through an evolution right now. And that evolution will ultimately lead to personal empowerment because the new awareness is going to free us from the beliefs that have been limiting us for the last couple hundred years.
I wanted to mention to our audience that my wife and I have just published a book dealing with the consciousness studies that were done at Stanford Research Institute that cover more than 20 years of more than 100 by the best American and European scientists on remote viewing, on remote communication, remote healing, indicating, as you just said so beautifully, that consciousness is the hidden variable for change. This book is called Mind Dynamics in Space and Time. It's really looking at the physics, the mathematics, the in-lab experiments that were done at Stanford Research Institute to a tune of $20 million, suggesting that the scientists themselves have to smell the coffee because we have incredible new books, documentation. The work that you're doing is wonderful, reaching around the world. I do want to recommend you to many of the conferences that will be coming up in Europe and South America where I work, and also through our connections with the United Nations. And we want to also help you as much as we can with our work. Could you tell us a little bit about your conference schedule?
Desiree, and Alan, I just wanted to say this to all three of you, basically, because you've known me for years, and I've been so fortunate and in gratitude for your support because we have been talking the same story for years. And it's finally coming to a point where people cannot afford conventional health care. They can't afford these damn drugs. You know, my brother had Hep C. He had a $100,000 bill to buy the drugs. $100,000. This can't go on. So basically, there's a time for personal empowerment. And all three of us have been talking personal empowerment for years, but we're finally, the population is moving into questioning the status quo because after all these years, healthcare with billions and billions of dollars is worse now than it was years ago. And the more they take us out of the picture, the more they take our personality out of the picture, our psychology out of the picture, our belief, the more they take us out, the worse healthcare has become.
Well, the millennials, the young people don't have the property investments, and they're looking for new directions. And this work of futurism in science and medicine, alternatives, all of this really sparks a whole new direction. And the young people who are listening to this program, you've got so much that you've offered in your great painstaking work throughout the world. We just have to continue this work because it's a labor of love to show the higher synthesis that is available now as consciousness studies validate the opportunities we have to move forward and to lessen the economic burdens, what we will call the influence of the pharmaceutical industry on the media, which unfortunately puts us into the doghouse, feeling this inferiority that where something's wrong with us when ultimately we need to reclaim the high road that we have beautiful and bright futures if we so desire.
100%. You know, everyone's familiar with the phrase, knowledge is power. But there's another way to say the same thing, but now it becomes more personal, and that is this. A lack of knowledge is a lack of power. And we have been deprived of the knowledge of who we really are. And it's not an accident, it's a manipulation, because we look at the world and there are powerful people, and then we look at ourselves and we say, geez, I'm not powerful and they're powerful. How did they get to be so powerful? There's a joke, and that is everybody is equally powerful. I say, then how did they get more power? And here's the joke. Away our power. So when we lose our power, they become more powerful. And we have been programmed for a couple of 100 years or more to give up our power, to presume that we are victims. And when you presume you're a victim, by definition, you are stating, I am powerless, I am a victim, and therefore I will get healing or what I need from somebody who is more powerful. And in this case, the pharmaceutical company puts them up there and says, look, you are victims, and we are the pharmaceutical company, buy the drugs, and we, and the fact is, we lost it.
Exactly. Bruce, I wanted to simply say that there's so much now is converging in terms of new studies that have been done throughout the world. We are connected with many of the universities in Europe, and we see really the larger picture of younger people looking really at the high road of what must be done. I think just the fact that so much of the economic stress is making young people reconsider their priorities. What you have offered in a very unique way has been to rewrite the biological textbooks, to rewrite the psychological textbooks, to rewrite the learning process that we're confronted with, and to realize ultimately the master attunement that we have. You know, in the ancient texts, and I started out my career by translating some of the ancient texts, there's the concept of the soul, the rational soul, and the higher soul, the soul that sees options. We have to stress the positive options. We have to build what I call a new cosmology of consciousness. And this is the blueprint of the Keys of Enoch. It was written in shorthand over 45 years ago, but now I see these things coming into play. And your role with what we call the new biology, the understanding of the genetic code through consciousness awareness and consciousness development is really so timely. It's absolutely necessary that we work closer together and build this university without walls, through the satellites, through the publications that we want to put on the internet, but also by bringing in what we will call a joyous cosmology of life, because that sets habitat.
Yeah. You know, JJ, what's most interesting about this, people start to listen to us and they'll go, wow, that's a new age weird people. And the joy for me is this. Quantum physics came into our reality in 1925, and the first premise, and I have to emphasize this, there is no more valid science on this planet. There's no science with more validity than quantum physics, and what's really relevant is that the premise of quantum physics is 1925 is that the experiences of our world are based on consciousness. That consciousness is creating this world. And so the simple understanding is that if consciousness is creating this world, then changing consciousness changes this world. I go, yeah, that's in physics, and yet biology has finally come up with an understanding of the mechanism of how that consciousness via epigenetics is that control. So biology and physics, quantum physics, are now in complete alignment, and that is the future evolution of the planet. And you've been talking about historically, this has been known for so long. What day, what time will it be when somebody says, okay, I'm now going to live by what JJ and Desiree and Alan and Bruce have been talking about. I'm taking back my power. The moment they do that is the moment the world changes. And this is what I'm looking for, because we are obviously in a state of that evolution right now. Am I talking to somebody here? Hello? Hello?
Bruce, it looks like they just dropped out for a second, so I'm just waiting for Alan to come back online. But we have around 10 more minutes, and here he is, so let me pull him on.
Okay, Bruce? Can you hear me?
I think Bruce just disconnected because he was calling out your name and no one answered. But let's see if he comes back on. Hold on.
We were disconnected for a little bit. Can we get back connected?
Yeah, let me see if he's calling back in. Hold on. So let's take just a 1 to 2 minute break. We have 17 minutes left. So hopefully Bruce calls back in 2 minutes, and then we'll get him back on. Okay, Alan?
Yeah, I'm here. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. But JJ was asking some beautiful questions, wasn't he?
Yeah, that was great. And here he is. So let me pull him on.
Sorry, apparently between New Zealand and America, I lost something. I'm back. Are you there? Am I there? Is that we here?
Yeah, you're here, Bruce. Yeah, I was just relieving JJ, who really was excited about talking to you. So, what was the last thing you said before we were disconnected?
Well, I was just basically referring to the fact about quantum physics. So I don't know if that came off or not.
Can you repeat some of that?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's very critical. The idea that all three of us, or four of us, put Desiree, because she wasn't on the phone, but JJ, Desiree, you, myself, for 20 years or more, have been talking about how consciousness is controlling our biology, and a lot of people look at that and go, oh, that's a new agey, weird stuff. I go, no. In 1925, quantum physics came into this world. It's a bigger, more valid science than Newtonian physics. In fact, quantum physics is the most valid science on this planet. And in 1925, from the day it started, the premise was this: consciousness is creating the universe as we experience it. That's quantum physics, the most valid science. Now biology, fortunately, through epigenetics and the stuff that JJ, Desiree, you, Alan, myself have been talking about, we have been talking about that nature of consciousness and controlling biology for years. Now the idea is biology and physics have come together to recognize we are creators. We are not victims. We are only perceiving ourselves as victims, since everyone is creating the world either through the perception of physics or either through the perception of epigenetics. And when we own this as truth, we become powerful. Knowledge is power, and this knowledge has been lacking. So we have lost power because we didn't know our consciousness was at the root of everything. You want to change life? Change consciousness. Whether you're a physicist or a biologist, both of them will come to the same understanding that we are powerful when we control our consciousness.
So is this possible? This is Alan Steinfeld again. Is it possible,
yes,
Bruce, and thank you for all your research and years of dedication to consciousness in a way, how do we start to educate a population that's still stuck in the old paradigm, the Newtonian, Darwinian ways of thinking? What's the first step if you were going to outline a new education for the citizens of planet Earth to start to take back that power? How would you go about doing that?
Well, as you said, how would I educate them? That's where, as I mentioned earlier, knowledge is power, and a lack of knowledge, by definition, means a lack of power. The knowledge that people are getting in their formal education is knowledge of disempowerment. It's knowledge, oh, you're a victim, and you have no control over your genes, and life unfolds this way, and you're just a victim, experiencing it. That's old belief. That is not new knowledge. New knowledge, whether it's from the physics or whether it's from the biology, says your thoughts are manifesting this. If you can control your thoughts and control your consciousness, then you are then physically and consciously controlling your life expression. Now, it's interesting because in my lectures, I tell what I think is the true story. Most people have seen the movie The Matrix, and they say, oh, The Matrix is science fiction. And I go, no, The Matrix is a documentary. Everyone has been programmed. That's a fact. The Matrix extends this and says, if you take the blue pill, then you just get caught up in the program and life goes on just the way the program has always made it. But they say if you take the red pill, you get out of the program. And I want people to recognize, that's why I wrote the book called The Honeymoon Effect. that because it's a common characteristic for people to fall in love. And I say, yeah, but what does it mean that moment you fall in love? And I go, it means this. Your life could suck every day. It sucks, and then one day you meet this wonderful partner, and the next day you're just full out in love. And I go, yeah, but your whole world changed because it sucked every day up until this point. You meet this person, 24 hours later, it's heaven on earth. Life is fun, wonderful, healthy, happy, joyous, loving. I go, wait a minute. That was 24 hours. Your whole life sucks. 24 hours later, heaven on earth. And we now know why. Science has recognized the act of falling in love is the equivalent of taking the red pill. The moment you take the red pill, you stay conscious. You don't default to the programs of limitation that all of us are in. So the moment you stop playing the subconscious limiting programs, the moment you start creating and manifesting your wishes and desires. Now, what's important about this, the honeymoon shows up when you get this big hit of love, but the simple reality was it was available all of the time. The only reason you didn't experience it is because you were not operating from the conscious mind. You were operating 95% of the programs, and that negative programming that we got creates the life struggles. And what was the point? Heaven on earth is available the moment you stop playing the program. That's basically what it says. And so basically it says then the issue is in the program. And that's what we've been emphasizing. And so you want heaven on earth? Stop playing the program.
I don't want to get too conspiratorial, but do you think was a part of a conscious intention to dumb people down and give them a program that didn't really work for them?
Unfortunately, I believe that's a conspiracy. I believe it's a conspiracy because if we didn't know programming existed, then I go, wow, what a coincidence. They didn't know it existed, and they've been misprogramming, but that's the way it was. And I go, no. As I mentioned, 400 years ago, the Jesuits said, give me a child until it's 7 and I will show you a man. They were already aware of the fact that whatever education you get for the first 7 years, that will shape the rest of your life because 95% of your life comes from it. So I say, well, that knowledge didn't disappear. It's 400 years old. And I said, well, then what has happened? I said, we have been systematically deprived of knowledge, the knowledge of who we really are, to get to the extent that today we systematically are programmed with you're a victim. You're a victim. You have no power. And that loss of power, which leads to a loss of health and a loss of love and joy, we've lost that by programming. And I say that wasn't a coincidence. That was for the benefit of those who get empowered, which in this case is the pharmaceutical industry. This idea we're talking about, especially the concept of placebo, which is the best example of mind over matter, has been actively restricted in medical education because of the personal power interest of the pharmaceutical industry that wants you to be a victim, because if you believe you're a victim, then you buy their drugs. And medical schools have had all the information we've been talking about for years, and yet they still don't teach personal empowerment because unfortunately they're manipulated by the gross amount of money that the pharmaceutical industries are raking in. It's a conspiracy in my picture.
But it's changing because people like you are coming forward, and many people in the human potential movement, which really you're associated with in some way. I mean, you are the grounding biological force of the human potential personal growth unfoldment. But is it changing? Do you see some crack in the ceiling that we are emerging out of as an empowered species at this time?
Yes, and it's so critical because we are facing what is called the sixth mass extinction of life on this planet. 5 times in the history of this planet, life was thriving, and then some event happened, such as a comet or asteroid hitting the planet, upending the environment, and from 70 to 90% of life gets wiped out. Right now, just for example, how much life have we lost? In 1970, they took a survey of how many animals were on the planet. They just did the survey again last year, and 60 or so % of the animal population has disappeared since 1970. 90% of the fish in the ocean have disappeared since 1950, and Germany just did a study in their national parks where they've been studying insect populations for 26 years, and they found that today's population is reduced 75% over what it was 26 years ago. What's the point? We're in the numbers of a mass extinction. Population, the web of life is collapsing. And we go to what's causing it? It wasn't an asteroid. It turns out human behavior. And why is it relevant? It says, well, if you want to survive on this planet, we're in that extinction wave. That's happening right now. And the only way out is to empower ourselves. And people are letting go of the structure because they find the structure is what's going down. You want to let go. And are people awakening to this? Well, I can tell you personally, when I first started lecturing on this new biology back in 1985, I could hardly get anybody to come into the room to listen to me. And today, we can get 1,000 or 2,000 people, meaning what? People are open. They need a change. They know it's not working right. And rather than buying into victim, it's a time for personal empowerment. And your programs, Alan, and JJ and Desiree's work are the kind of information that these people that are questioning are looking, saying, boy, those answers are better. And I see this happening all the time. So we are in an evolution, and the question is how fast the mass of the population will get out of the limitations of our conventional biomedical genetic world and take their power back, which we've always had, but we were programmed out of it. Because once you take the power back, you become the creator. That's what quantum physics said since 1925, and this is what biology has said since 1990 when epigenetics came in that recognizes genes don't control us, we control genes. We are the power. So we're in a process. We're in an evolution. And when you look at the world collapsing around us, this is, for me, the exciting moment. You mean I'm excited that the world is in chaos? And I go, yes. And the reason is this. We're facing the sixth mass extinction. We're in it. The only way out of it is for humans to change behavior. And that means we have to change civilization. And the only way to change civilization is to break the old structure down so we can build a more stable, harmonious civilization on the new knowledge. So when you look out the window and the world is collapsing and crazy people like the government that is destroying the United States are in charge, I look and I go, thank God. These guys are destroying the structure. And people go, what do you mean? It's crazy. They're destroying it. And I go, if we don't build the new culture based on this new science, then humans are going to be part of that extinction process where we're facing it right now. So look at the world falling apart. It's bad. It's good.
Crisis leads to evolution and the stress. It reminds me of what happened in the earliest days of creation when they were just single cell animals that were producing oxygen as a toxic waste product, and the atmosphere was full of oxygen, and these creatures had to come to a point where they needed to shift from carbon breathing to oxygen breathing, or from nitrogen breathing to oxygen. I mean, that was a point of transformation and Christ awakened a new species. Is that what we're in now?
We're in that exactly right now. It says, wake up. Your world is disappearing, not by comets or geological activity. Your world is disappearing because of human behavior. You want to stay here? Oh, then we must change our human behavior. So basically it says the structure of the system that we're living in right now is causing the problem. And if we change how life works in our communities and in our culture, we have an option to get out. And so it's interesting because the millennial generation, those people under 40, coincidentally, are always been complaining about, well, I can't get into the system, I can't get a job, I owe all the student money, the life sucks, the world's not giving us a break. And I say, you know what's interesting? They have been separating themselves from the structure. You tell a millennial, hey, the stock market's going to crash, and the millennial will probably say, well, what do I care? Do you think I own a stock? And I say, this is the exciting part. What is it? The millennial generation is at least 50% of the population. I say, why is it relevant? If they're not connected to the structure because they're not even in the structure, then that means the structure that exists is in the process of falling, and the new structure, really led by the millennials who find themselves on the outside, will create the new structure. And when they create the new structure, it'll be one that we could thrive into. So when you see the falling down, you see the millennials not connected to the system, I said that's part of evolution. The millennials are going to create a new civilization, one that we can thrive into. The current civilization is the cause of the problem. So falling apart and finding half the population doesn't give a damn because they're not connected, these are instrumental phases of an evolutionary change. We're in evolution, and it's in the transition. The point is simple. Structure A is going to go to structure B. What's the point? Well, then structure A, by definition, has to disassemble itself because it's not the same structure as B. So what are we looking at? The structure of our world, which has led us up to this moment, is now collapsing. I go, is this a scary thing? I say, it's a necessary thing because that civilization is causing the problem. The new civilization, which is evolving at this minute, is really from a younger generation and elders from the older generation, which are more like guides to help this millennial move in. So my point is very simple. Yeah, look at the world. It's in a state of upheaval. I say, thank God. Because if it's not in a state of upheaval, then evolutionary extinction is looming faster than anyone could think. Extinction is not 1,000 years from now. We're talking less than 100 years. And so either we do something now or it's gone as far as we know. Yeah, and so it's a wake-up call.
I think we
only have a minute and a half left, guys, by the way.
What's that? Oh. A minute and a half left. So the final question then, Bruce, and thank you for the insight, is that we are at this critical point, and I think people are waking up. What does the future then look like if we would say, yes, we made it through this breaking point? How does the world look, our education, our minds, our community? What is the vision of this restructured future?
It's wonderful. I'll give you an example because the structure of our universe is fractal, and images repeat themselves from lower to higher levels of organization. Our body is not a single entity. Our body is a community of 50 trillion cells. The cells are the living entity. The cells are individual citizens. They live in a community. I say when we understand how they live in community, then you can recognize how 50 trillion citizens under your skin can create a happy, healthy, loving human body. When we are in love and we are happy and healthy, that's 50 trillion citizens sharing that experience simultaneously. What we have is 8 billion people almost, and what we have to do is recognize if they could live in the same harmony that cells in the body live in, using the same biological principles, then the entire human population becomes a new organism called humanity, where each of us is a cell in the body of that new organism. And if we could live like the cells in our body, then it says the entire planet could be as healthy and happy and loving as an individual who is experiencing that in their own physiology. The whole planet will experience that, and that's where we're moving to right now. That's exactly where we're going to.
Well, that is the beautiful vision that I think we're all holding. I know me and Dr. Hertog and Desiree Hertog are holding the vision of a greater humanity. I think Dr. Hertog has one final comment here.
Bruce, we'll acknowledge the great leadership that you've shown as social scientists, as people who work also in genetics and biology. We feel that you must keep your work ahead of schedule and be the flagship for all of us. So good luck, good blessings on your work, and we support you unconditionally. Thank you so much for this great interview.
Yeah. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you, Desiree, Alan. I just want to be in that community that you are because that's the community of our future. So thank all of you.
Well, it's a community of everyone listening, and it is a future that we're building with these words that are being put out to the public. So thanks again, Bruce. Thank you, Neil Gore. Portal to Ascension is part of the Blog Talk series that Portal Ascension is doing. And, Bruce, I hope to see you really, really soon.
I look forward to it, and thank you, Alan, JJ, Desiree, and the wonderful community of listeners out there. It's our future. It's going to be beautiful.
Thank you. This is Alan Steinfeld for New Realities. If you want to reach me, go to my website, newrealities.com, YouTube.com/New Realities. Thank you, Neil. It's been a pleasure to bring through some of the great minds of our times to help evolve our community together. Thank you, and good day.